Crawlers are known as humanoid cryptids. They are known for their distinctive pale, hairless and ashen skin. They're emaciated in appearance and average a range of 5 to 8 feet in height upright, but they're typically seen crawling on all fours in a hunched over position, hence the name crawler. They have black sunken-in eyes, sharp teeth, no lips or nose. There have been reports of them in the northern parts of the world and even Australia. Crawlers tend to dwell in small enclosed spaces like caves. Think of those creepy-ass creatures from The Descent. Most crawler sightings are at night in open areas, particularly forests or the bush. Crawlers have been known to let off an ear-piercing screech when approached. I'm 20 years old and I live in Austria. I finally got my first real job after graduating a technical school, and I'm very happy with my current life. But recently, memories started to pop up and I can barely sleep. I have the feeling I need to finally talk to people about what I witnessed over the course of years. There is only 3 people who know about this until now. My fiancé, my mother, and my grandfather. I grew up in a pretty rural area within Austria. We moved there when I was 6, and since then I've seen things. It began by having that feeling of being looked at when passing our windows at night. Initially, I thought it might just be me being a bit scared of the dark. Usually I'd see our cats outside of the windows, and mostly it was nothing. One day, I remember going down to grab myself a bottle of water, and I saw them looking at me from the outside. We had what we call a winter garden. It's basically a small room attached to the main building made out of glass. In front of the winter garden, from the outside, was a floor made of gravel. There were 2 to 3 different creatures, varying in different heights, crawling on their long, skinny arms. Their skin was grey in tone. I would actually say a mix of grey and a slight touch of brown. No hair, just skin. Now, I can't remember the amount of fingers or the toes. I remember the shape. The reason I said they looked was because they had no eyes, humanoid body, but very long and skinny. I can only describe their body type like one of those very skinny prepubescent kids from school. The bigger one was around 2.5 meters in height. I know this because that was the height of the winter garden. The second one was a bit bigger than me when I first saw him, so I assume about 1.7 meters in height. They stared at me, walked around the house and peeked through the second set of windows that were located in front of the kitchen. Now, the kitchen and the winter garden are connected. I didn't move or scream. I was shocked. I didn't want to move or breathe or look directly at them. I was afraid that if I did do any of these things, they would either hear me or see me, even though they had no eyes. After a while, they moved away towards the forest that was basically 5 meters away from the house. I ran to my bedroom, hid in my bed under my blanket. The next morning, I decided not to tell my dad or my mum because it felt unreal. Did I actually see anything? Was it even a dream? The feeling when I saw them was like a curtain fell down. Years pass, I'm now 17, and I can barely remember what happened, but I gained an insane fear of the outside around our house, especially at night. I felt like I was being watched anytime my head peeked at the windows, only when there was no snow. I don't know why, but at this point I was only living in my parents' house on the weekends because I'd already moved to the housing my school had, which was about an hour and a half away from the house. It was a Saturday, and I went down to make myself a midnight snack, and the curtain fell down. I saw them, having their heads turned into my direction, their movements similar to an animal looking at you, looking at me, and walking. The shock kicked in, and I stayed still for 20 minutes. I know this because we had a working clock in the kitchen. I eventually moved because they showed no aggression. They just looked at me, and as I turned to grab my water, I ran up to my room and started to cry, out of shock most likely. The following months, it happened again and again, to the point that I got used to the pull myself together routine and just move. I even ate cornflakes while they watched me. At this point, I was already convinced I'd gone insane. Everything I saw had to be an illusion. Hyper-realistic schizophrenia, something like that. Closely after I turned 18, I started looking a bit closer at how the surroundings reacted to them. The gravel, the stones, they moved with them stepping on it. They moved their arms and feet, just so slightly. The shock set in again, and again I started to cry. They moved as always, slowly away around the house and back to the forest. Now, the night that haunted me the most. Every time I try and remember this night, the fear and panic start to set back in. So I have this balcony in front of my huge bedroom window that also has a door that you can completely open. In front of the balcony was the gravel floor. So basically, the winter garden's roof was my balcony. It was a really warm night, so I had my window and door open completely, and the curtain blocking potential insects from coming inside. I was laying on my bed trying to sleep when I hear steps on the gravel. It could have been the cats, but then I keep listening. I use the light from the screen of my phone and face it towards the curtain. The curtain moves barely to the side, and the head peeked in. The biggest one of them climbed up the winter garden on top of the balcony. I went into complete shock and my body froze out of fear. Its head moved backwards and the curtain wiggled a bit. I also just remembered that there is quite a lot of cave systems within the area. After this last incident, I moved away and thankfully never saw them again. I seriously need help and am terrified out of my mind. So I'll start off by saying I've never believed in anything paranormal. I'm a pretty science-based dude. I always look for a logical explanation, and I still am for this encounter. So if anyone has any ideas, let me know. I don't have much time for leisure with work recently, being having to accept some pretty awful shifts to get by with COVID times. So I've lost my ability to go out on my evening walks, which are a method of stress relief for me. So 3 nights ago, I decided to just go for a late night walk. I put on my headband flashlight and decided to take a path I hadn't in ages. There's a small trail near the back of my neighbourhood that goes about 4 miles deep into the woods. My plan was to walk about 1.5 miles in and take the parallel path to come back. I make it down to around 1.3 miles, according to my Fitbit, and I start getting that feeling I'm being watched. I turn off my headlight and sit still to listen. At this point, I'm more concerned there's a guy following me who is up to no good. I heard clear footsteps in the leaves off the trail, and they've been behind me for nearly 5 minutes. I stopped, thinking it was an animal or another walker, and became worried. Sitting there for about probably 3 to 4 minutes, and I hear nothing at all. I turn back on my headlight and decide to start walking back home. About 2 minutes later, I hear footsteps again. This time, it sounds different. It sounds like 4 feet instead of 2. And it's walking at the same increased speed that I am. I turn around quickly with my headlight and my phone light and point it behind me. Silence. I get angry and yell out, "Leave me alone! I'm going to call the cops! And if you come at me, I have a knife!" Silence. I yell again to get the fuck out of here and start walking towards where I heard the walking. Roughly 20 yards out, I see what looks like a literal naked man running full speed on all 4s into the woods. Normally, I'd chalk that up to drugs, but my area does not have a drug problem, and there were some details that lead me to believe it wasn't a person. For one, they were damn near hairless, completely bald, pale white skin, and the way it ran on all 4s looked natural. Not like when you try to run on all 4s and look stupid. It looked like its bone structure was designed to walk on all 4s. There was no hunched look, their back was flat, and they were really fast. Last thing that happened was straight out of a horror movie. I hadn't heard anything in a while on my way back, but kept turning around to be sure. with about 3 miles left to go until I was in the clear, I hear a mad dash through the leaves. I whip around and it stops on a dime. I see the edges of its head behind a tree and yell loudly to try and intimidate. What I heard next, I'll never forget in my entire life. It cackled like a monkey, a noise I've literally only heard in nature documentaries. The tone was that of a mockery, a predator having fun with me. I didn't stick around. I sprinted as fast as I possibly could back home. I'd love to believe this was some prank or some rabid, ball-diseased coyote, but I got a pretty clear look at it. It wasn't. It had human feet and human hands, a human head and a human buttocks, but nothing else about it was human. I called the cops after and told them a man was following me. I didn't want to say some creature because they'd think I'm crazy. They didn't find anything, but they did see quite a bit of activity in the leaves and dirt about 50 feet from where the trail was, leading far back into the woods before it got to a large stretch of grass where no footprints were seen. So after some internal debate, I decided I was going to go back because it would eat me up not knowing what this thing was. When I first saw it, I had zero idea what it could be. I figured some drugged out or mentally ill man, a prankster or sickly deformed animal. After letting it all settle though, there's just no way any of that was the case. I was trying to justify it in my mind because I've always been a heavy skeptic of anything paranormal. And to be fair, I still am. But I'm warming up to the idea that crawlers may actually exist. So I messaged 3 of my buddies, told them everything that happened in detail over text, and asked them if they'd come look with me. Them, being non-believers like me, and also just loving adventure and spooky stuff, were more than excited to go. 2 of the friends have guns, and so do I. So we all brought them. Just to be clear, 1 friend had a pistol, and 1 had a shotgun. I also had a pistol. Now, the other friend was in charge of holding the 2 flashlights to give us some light. 1 being a phone flashlight, so he would be ready to take a picture at a moment's notice. We waited until 9:30 p.m, when it was completely dark, and headed down the same trail I did last time. My heart was pumping out of my chest, but I felt more confident having friends there. They were joking around and thought this was cool, and I tried joking back a few times, but the reality was I was pretty nervous. We walked the full 1.5 miles I had planned on walking last time and didn't encounter a thing. We had prepped for so long though and didn't want to give up quite yet, so we kept walking. About 5 or 8 minutes later, at close to the 2-mile mark, we started hearing some noises way back in the woods. It wasn't close, but it was loud enough for us to take notice. I told my friend to turn off the flashlight for a second and we listened. Bipedal footsteps made their way closer to us. Still far, but definitely coming our way. It sounded like they were wearing boots or something because of the heaviness of the steps were quite loud. That, or there were a lot of leaves, which, to be fair, is a possibility. It was off the trail, so it's all woods back there. Once the footsteps made it about 20 to 30 yards away, I called out asking if someone was here. The footsteps stopped, but only for a brief second. A second later, the bipedal footsteps turned into what sounded like something sprinting on all 4s in our direction. My friend immediately turned on the flashlights, but there was nothing visible through the dense forest. At the beginning of the trail, the forest is pretty clear, but further back, it gets a lot more dense, so it was hard to tell. Once he turned on the light, the footsteps stopped as well. None of my friends were talking. Paranormal believer or not, hearing that will scare the shit out of you. My friend unholstered his pistol and kept it by his side. He looked at me and I could see he wasn't having a good time anymore. My friend holding the camera was visibly shaky and was darting his glance between all of us. The 3rd friend shortly after yelled into the woods, "I see you! Come out! Stop fucking with us! We have guns and we'll shoot! I don't want to hurt you over some dumb joke. Now come on!" We hear that sound again. The one that sounded like a cackle. Only this time, it was more of a yell or shriek, aggravated noise. I don't even know what to compare it to. I just know it gave me goosebumps. My friend immediately shot his gun into the woods, causing my ears to ring horribly. due to me being right next to him. I couldn't hear for shit, but I noticed his gaze went from the spot we heard the footsteps, from over to the right of the spot, about 90 degrees. I followed his gaze for about half a second, caught a glimpse of once again, a tall human-like thing running on all fours behind a tree. He started walking towards that direction, but my friend with the flashlight stopped him. He made the point that it was a buckshot. The chances he missed were slim due to the fact that the tree it was next to was covered in evidence that the shot was on target. My friend made a scary point that we hadn't considered. What if it hit it, but didn't hurt it? What if he was right? What if it took a shotgun hit and it didn't even fall over? My estimate is that it was between 6 foot and 6'4", and maybe between 140 to 165 pounds. So if it could still run after that shot, it either didn't get hit, or it's not something we want to mess with. We hear the cackle I heard the first time, that mocking noise. Not so much an aggravated noise this time, more so a noise that it gave me the impression it was having fun, or enjoying the fear we blatantly had in our voices. No more footsteps, but my friend shot in its general direction again, ears ringing again. I couldn't see anything, but I did see a small glimpse again of it running off deeper into the woods. Could only see its rear for a second or two before it was too far to be seen by the light. This meant it had to be running pretty fast. I don't want to give a number, but if I had to guess, it was easily around 20 miles per hour or so. Nothing a human could do on all fours, that's for damn sure. We turned around and jogged back home. Upon getting home, we talked about what we saw. Nobody was disputing my story now. We had all seen it. We talked all night. I showed them some of my comments on my last post where they suggested a crawler. We read a lot of posts and some of them matched our experience and some didn't. But we did all agree that if this was paranormal, that a crawler was the best guess we had. Now we are all on the same page. We still don't know if we buy into the paranormal claims, but this one is starting to convince us. We realised at the end we hadn't even looked for pictures. We asked my friend who had the phone, and he shyly admitted he hadn't even thought to take a single picture. I'm not gonna lie guys, I was so terrified. I didn't even open the camera app a single time. I was just trying to make sure it wasn't behind us or charging us. I'm sorry. We told him not to worry. None of us would have been any better about being calm enough to set up a picture. I never saw its face still, but the friend who took the shot swears it didn't have one, or at least had no eyes. He couldn't see if it had a mouth, but it was about a third out from behind the tree, and from his angle, he saw it was blank from the nose area up. Or, if it did have eyes, it was too black to be noticeable in the dark. We did all decide though, we're going to go back. We'll be more prepared this time. We'll do our research, we'll have a camera strapped to us, or always recording. We know what to expect, so we'll be more calm. The encounter took place about 4 years ago. Since learning about humanoids, and in particular about the rake, I was always very fascinated about them. Back in the good old days, one of my best friends, Robert, would come over for sleepovers. I introduced him to the rake. We always watched horror movies or videos of bizarre encounters, as we loved to frighten ourselves before venturing out into the local woods. Now, I basically live a 2-minute walk away from the woods. Till that night trip, we never encountered anything really creepy when venturing out into the woods. Sometimes, Robert would try and stand still in silence in hope of hearing something exciting. For example, an animal walking over woods or sticks and creating sounds. In order for you to better understand my thoughts later on, I want to give you a detailed explanation of our path. It was after midnight when we headed out. Shortly after entering the forest, there was a small crossing with a left path and a right path. We took the right path, walking up a hill for about a quarter of an hour. After that, we just pretty much followed the path, reaching the peak of the hill, and then ventured down again for about 10 minutes. We reached another crossing. The left path would lead us to another exit, whereas the straight path would lead us to continue walking on to another hill. About half an hour going up the hill, I told Robert that I wanted to go home, as I was starting to get cold and exhausted. Furthermore, I told him that I did not see us witnessing anything exciting anymore for the night. Robert was disappointed, but nonetheless, he agreed. Robert wanted us to regularly stop on our way back and stop speaking so that we could be completely silent to see if we could hear anything around us. We also flashed our lights into the woods regularly. This is where it starts to get creepy. As we started to head down the second hill, we started to relax and talk about other interests. As my back then shrimp posture obliged me to, I more or less only looked down at my feet when walking. As we reached the second crosswalk again, Robert suddenly scurried up. In panic, he asked me whether I also saw something jump into the woods coming from the right path. As I'd already mentioned, I looked at my feet when walking down the path, meaning I couldn't have seen anything. However, I believed that Robert just wanted to build up suspense, as he liked to do that when nothing happened on our trips. So I didn't really believe him in that. He started throwing rocks in the area where he said the figure seemed to head. We stood still for some minutes, listening for any suspicious sounds, but the forest was in total silence. Realizing this, it made me somewhat uncomfortable. On our way back from the second crossing back to the first, we started to ease back down again and started talking normally. The walk back took us about half an hour. Again, it started to get creepy. As we were about to reach that first crossing, I used my flashlight on the trees that were not too far in front of us. As I pointed my light on them, I noticed that there were 2 yellow dots right beside a big tree. As we came closer, I could see it more clearly. These were not just 2 yellow dots. I started to recognize a bald head with these 2 yellow glowing eyes. I told Robert to stand still. I pointed him in the area that the thing was peeking from behind the tree. I was furious at him because he didn't see it. I told him that he needed to focus on the yellow dots. When he recognized it, he freaked out too. I freaked out even more when I thought about our situation. This creature stood between the only exit out of the forest and us. We really started to panic because we didn't know what to do. As Robert also started to flash on that creature with his flashlight, we both more or less shouted at ourselves. The creature went behind the tree and peeked out from the other side. As we followed with our lights, it stepped back from the tree. I was able to see more of its body. It was a white greyish colour, hunched over. Its arms were hanging down, and it slowly walked away from the crossing, moving one leg, then the other. We stood on this spot for a few seconds. Then I carefully started to peek in the area it vanished from. I couldn't see it anymore. I told Robert to run for his fucking life, and boy oh boy, even Usain Bolt would have been astonished of our speed in that run. We ran through the exit and went back to my home. It was the scariest experience of my life. What I really find so intriguing about this encounter, this creature either followed or stalked us very quietly through the woods for about half an hour since Robert spotted it on the second crossing till the exit, or it was smart enough to recognise the path we took would be leading us to, as we first saw it at our second crossing and then in front of us at the exit. It was able to recognise pretty fast that we'd spotted it too, I think by switching sides at the tree when peeking out. And it wanted to confirm for itself whether we'd spotted it by seeing us rotating the light to the other side of the tree. And last but not least, I do not think it was scared in the slightest of us. Even as I and Robert started to speak more loudly, in a stressed out voice, it only walked away calmly. If I had to guess, I'd say that this thing was about 2 meters tall. So after I did some research, it seems that some characteristics align with that fateful night of mine. It was winter when we went out, and it was a completely dark night. Now there is one thing that does not leave my mind. Not far away from the place we encountered the crawler is a dried up river. At one point or rather, at the seeming end of the river, are multiple little dug-in cave entrances. I always believed that due to the small size, foxes have dug them, and since then reside there. I mean, it is a place that no person actually comes near, as it is difficult to traverse. However, after reading multiple stories, I cannot leave the idea out of my mind that a crawler could actually reside deep down in these caves. Not an expert on this, it's just food for thought. And now, even though these cave entrances do look like a normal fox burrow, I've almost never seen one fox in my entire 21 years of living here. This event took place about 6 months ago. I love to stay up late and read stories and watch movies and so on. The typical night out you've surely read about before somewhere. That night, I already turned off the TV and browsed on my mobile phone, ready to go to bed. My window was tilted inwards to ventilate the room, when all of a sudden, I hear a loud, aggressive shrieking, or rather clicking sound, coming right from under my window. I live on the second floor. It is really hard for me to describe that scream precisely or find any similar references to it. I've never heard that sound before. I know how wild boars sound, but that surely was not one. Furthermore, I had to instantly reference that scream to the crawler I saw back before. What scares me the most is that this scream came from right under my window. It really seems to me that it did that on purpose, to make me aware of its presence, to challenge me. I was scared shitless and did not move a muscle for about 10 minutes. 5 minutes after that, I heard a few sounds coming from our carport, like someone stepping on uneven metal plate or metallic things being moved around. I didn't hear anything after that for the rest of the night, and my family did not remark anything to be missing afterwards. So, if we assume that this was the crawler from back then, why would it let us walk away then without making any aggressive moves at all? And some years after it positions itself right under my window and makes itself to be known in an aggressive manner. I know it may sound like an exaggerated wild fantasy to you, but it really felt like that crawler wanted to remind me that it is still there and knows my location and me. It felt like it wanted to mock or dominate me.